Here we are. Now we'll talk about noise. So noise is an option. Here, I'll go ahead and edit it. This will make a lot more sense. If you've ever tried to look at what noise was, this will make a lot of sense. What noise does is it adds it adds what looks like other geometry. It looks like it makes things bumpy. It's sort of, in other 3D modeling applications, it's called a deformation or a deformer. And in here, you can choose from a number of different kinds, but the names are a little nonsensical. They're derived from an artistic mind different than mine. I'm not sure where the names originally came from, but many of them can have specific purposes. So what we did here is, in this particular file, we've given you basically a 3D object that has these noises designed for them. So in here, it has a small explanation of what it can be used for. Some of these will look like bullet-struck concrete or cubic light, or different. You can use these for water or brain. I mean, they're just a number of weird, procedurally generated, so they don't have seams. They are generally just for artistic effect. Sometimes you can get cloth out of them. Sometimes you can do leather. It just matters what you're looking for. Surface of the moon. You know, there's a couple things it does. This image here is just to give you an idea of what that is going to look like if you enable displacement mapping in addition to it. So here, this looks like almost a broken glass. This looks pretty cool if you put it on a window and then shine light through it and you give it a refractive texture. It'll make the light sort of splay out like a stained glass window. It looks really cool. And now we'll take this a little bit further. I have a demo object prepped in here, 406A. There. This is the object we use to get those images for each of the noise textures. But this one is designed to demo that actual concept. So this one is just noise cell. I believe there's going to be a second file that has all the noises we remade in here, but for now, this one just has noise cell and noise marble. And we have a render style prepped for this. Noise style. Because I can see in OpenGL, you can't really see any detail whatsoever. We'll go with noise style. And now you can see it, but look at this. Look at the edges. See how they're perfectly smooth? Even though it looks like it's bumping out here, it actually isn't changing the geometry, and that's not what the image looked like. The image before looked like it was actually sticking out to the sides and making holes and actually affecting the geometry. That was because displacement mapping was enabled. In this noise style mode, displacement mapping is not turned on. Noise, when you add a noise to an object and it has a displacement value set to it, which we can check here. So you have a very slight displacement to it, set to medium. Generally don't set this higher than medium almost all the time. We then go back here, and we can see that it's not actually sticking out. That's because we don't have it turned on. There's another RenderWorks style in here called Noise Style Displaced. This one's going to take a little longer, so I will accelerate time. Prior to now, I haven't been speeding anything up. This takes about 50 seconds, though. Displacement is heavy work for a machine. It has to do the actual geometry calculation, and I can't think of anything to talk about for 40 seconds. So we'll let this run, and we'll be back right when it's done. There we go. That was about 45 seconds of math. And now you can see you can actually get the detail. I've turned this up a little higher so that you can see it against the background. The white color against the black background is fairly obvious. And I have Ambient Occlusion turned on here to give it some definition. You can see how it's fuzzy here. That's because I have anti-aliasing disabled. This still rendered in less than a minute, which isn't bad for a complicated render. I just wanted to speed it up. If you want this to stop happening, then in the rendering style, you would enable anti-aliasing and turn that value up a little bit, low or medium, to get rid of this faceting here going on. But that's how noise textures work. By default, they don't displace if you don't have displacement mapping turned on, of course. And if you don't want them to displace at all, you can just make the displacement value 0, and you'll just get the sort of effect. But if you want things like light to glint off of them, if you want caustics to work, if you want them to cast shadows that are physically modified, you'll need to actually use displacement. You can't just use the noise trick, which just sort of applies a general shading over the texture like we saw a moment ago. This is basically just a rendering trick. It's just applying areas of dark and light as if these were edges, basically as if you were drawing something that looked volumetric in 3D in edges, but it's not really. This isn't actually changed that way. So if I get close to it, oops, too close. If I get close to this, the illusion starts to break down or re-renders. See, it's not actually displacing it across the edges here. This is nice and smooth across this edge once it finishes rendering. It's just adding edges of light and dark. When you use displacement in conjunction with the noise texture and actually give it a value, then you get the bumped out images that you saw here. you'll get the actual bumped out areas. And you can see these striations that are happening vertically here. That's just the value for quality. That's curve geometry. I believe this was set to medium. I set mine to high, so you won't see it. You can also turn this down if you want the render to go faster. If you know what the object underneath already looks like and you want to save some time, you can turn this down. That's the general idea of how noise shaders work. There's not many of them work pretty much the same way, and you can change the drasticness at which it shows high and low is normally just controlled via the actual. Here, we'll go to the texture. Noise cell. And you can see this will give you a little demo of the actual displacement. That's because this has a displacement value. I can also override that by simply setting this to nothing, just no displacement mapping, this will go gray and disable it. If you ever get these are still lit up and this is set to 0, it might just mean you've set a value that's smaller than your document's total precision. So if this ever says like 0 meters and these are still enabled, just select this and reset it back to 0. It might just have been a value that you entered that was smaller than your document rounding precision. And you can see this updated very quickly. It didn't need anything else because it's not actually doing the displacement mapping. That's just a little taste of how noise mixed with displacement mapping gives you the results like you saw on that chart.